A single viral Filipino ticket sent 500 Dubai engineers to Cebu, chasing an ancient building technique dismissed by experts until hard evidence changed minds. Sometimes the future of architecture arrives in forms older than our certainties. In late autumn, Dubai's skyline gleamed with engineered confidence. Towers that cleaved the sky and foundations anchored deep into reclaimed sand. At the heart of those achievements stood one figure, Omar Al-Faraj, chief structural engineer for a multinational firm responsible for Dubai's newest, tallest project. Omar's career had been a ledger of precision calculations, codes, and contracts. He trusted, tested materials and decades of regional data. So when his firm's procurement team mentioned a trending package called the Filipino Ticket, promising site visits and workshops in Cebu about hybrid bamboo lattice systems, Omar smiled with polite curiosity. He assumed novelty, then risk. He assumed spectacle, not solution. He did not assume revolution. The Filipino Ticket began innocently. A Cebuan consortium partnered with a travel portal to promote heritage architecture tours alongside hands-on workshops during a restoration festival. A coding error briefly created deep discounts and multiplied visibility through engineering forums. Social posts showed elegant wooden lattices and old-school timber joints that looked ornamental, not structural. Influencers framed the offer as quaint, inviting foreign professionals to admire craftsmanship rather than revise practices. Yet in obscure academic threads, a Filipino structural engineer named Rosa Navarro had published tests hinting at extraordinary performance for certain bamboo composites when combined with modern binders. Her papers sat unread in quiet journals. The viral promotion flung those findings into an impatient global spotlight. Omar's initial reaction was emblematic: amused dismissal. He pictured decorative screens, artisanal workshops, and heritage displays beautiful but irrelevant to mega towers. His firm's risk matrix assigned such offers low priority. Procurement booked only a handful of seats for junior architects as a cultural perk. News feeds, however, told a different story. Engineers in Singapore, Melbourne, and several Gulf offices saw screenshots of resilient lattice structures withstanding extreme wind tests in simulations Rosa had run. A murmur grew into a debate. Could indigenous materials inform large-scale design? For Omar, the question seemed rhetorical until a dataset arrived that refused to be aesthetic alone. Meanwhile, in Cebu, Rosa Navarro watched the viral frenzy with wary fascination. Rosa had grown up near coastal villages where traditional builders used a hybrid of bamboo species, woven frameworks, and lime-pounded infill for community structures. She pursued formal engineering, but her research always looped back to the question of resilience. Why did lightweight hybrid houses survive cyclones with less damage than some modern masonry? Her journals recorded controlled tests comparing tensile strength, energy absorption, and joint ductility. The results were nuanced. Bamboo composites showed superior energy dissipation in lateral loading when hybridized with steel ties and modern epoxy in precise configurations. Rosa feared oversimplification, yet she recognized an opportunity. The tipping moment came when a private engineering blog in Dubai reposted Rosa's simulation videos without context, captioned, "Bamboo beats steel?" The post ignited skepticism and curiosity in equal measure. Omar received a forwarded message from a junior with the subject line, "Worth the trip." The junior argued that understanding alternative materials might reduce foundation loads and life cycle costs for future projects. Omar laughed aloud, picturing code violations and insurance refusals. He drafted a curt reply, "Interesting, but irrelevant." Yet a seed of professional duty took root. If nothing else, due diligence required a look. He asked procurement to expand seats to include senior technical leads. The firm agreed reluctantly. 500 engineers departed Dubai with a mix of derision and curiosity, some seeking exotic anecdotes, others secretly hoping for a novel technical advantage. Flights arrived in Cebu during the festival week, greeted by cheerleaders of heritage tourism and a tidy local operations team. The island's air smelled of sea and sawdust. Rosa watched airport photos of men in hard hats and polished shoes, the very professionals who built modern skylines now standing under coconut palms. She felt a complex emotion: pride for her culture, apprehension for her method, and professional caution about how quickly fragile knowledge might be commodified. The stage was set for collision: lived tradition versus institutional certainty. Omar's first day on site began with confident surveys and condescending smiles. The exhibition hall displayed prototypes: bamboo-reinforced columns, woven web panels, and modular nodes crafted with precision. He tapped calculations into his tablet while evaluating joints with the clinical eye of someone who made warranties. At a demonstration, a senior local builder, an unassuming man named Mang Ben, stood barefoot and invited a volunteer to apply lateral force to a mid-sized lattice panel. The panel flexed and returned, absorbing energy with a controlled rhythm. Omar frowned. He had seen flexible systems fail by buckling. This showed ductility without catastrophic collapse. He stayed to watch more tests, unconsciously extending his schedule. Rosa arranged a controlled demonstration the following morning. Scaled tower models were subjected to simulated gusts, using programmable fans and varying mass distributions. Sensors recorded strain, displacement, and load paths. The models combined modern steel cores with bamboo lattices and polymer joints hybridization, designed to marry stiffness and flexibility. Omar scrutinized output graphs printed across boards. The data did not flirt with ambiguity. It suggested that certain hybrid configurations reduced peak inertial loads by a measurable margin while localizing deformation in predictable zones. An uneasy thought surfaced. These configurations could reduce foundation depth requirements in some contexts, lowering costs and carbon footprint. Professional curiosity stabbed through skepticism. The festival buzzed as engineers shifted tone from spectacle to inquiry. Delegations formed around Rosa's lab, swapping sketches and asking about joint tolerances, species selection, and maintenance regimes. Omar found himself staying longer than planned, interrogating material creep data and fatigue cycles. He consulted published code amendments from experimental construction trials in Southeast Asia. He realized that the technology's value wasn't universal. It was contextual, best suited for mid-rise typologies, seismic zones, and regions where reducing embodied carbon mattered. The revelation unsettled his assumptions, but excited his engineering instincts. How to translate localized genius into reliable, standardized practice for metropolitan applications. Tensions rose when a senior executive from Omar's firm declared publicly that the entire experiment was nostalgic nonsense, unfit for liability-laden projects. The executive argued for maintaining the company's conservative stance and avoiding reputation risk. The statement went viral among attending engineers and provoked heated exchanges in technical forums. Some saw the executive's stance as protective, others condemned it as closed-minded. Omar found himself torn between corporate caution and empirical curiosity. He requested a controlled field experiment using full-scale mock-ups and professional instrumentation. Rosa and local masters agreed, conditional on meticulous documentation and community involvement. The next phase involved building full-scale test frames on a coastal testbed outside Cebu city. Local carpenters and university students worked with visiting engineers to assemble hybrid nodes, combining treated bamboo, high-strength steel ties, and advanced epoxy bonding. Mang Ben taught craft techniques, precise lashing patterns, and species selection, while Rosa insisted on modern instrumentation placement, accelerometers, strain gauges, and thermal sensors. The assembly process itself became a study in knowledge transfer, Western engineers learning hand techniques, Cebu builders learning instrumented documentation. The process produced friction and laughter, arguments over tolerances, and quiet moments of mutual respect. When the first controlled seismic simulation ran a lateral shaking protocol replicating a 7 event, the hybrid frame exhibited a fascinating failure sequence. Instead of brittle breaks, the structure redistributed loads, with bamboo elements yielding progressively while steel cores maintained integrity. Loose connections acted as sacrificial fuses, preventing total collapse. Data streams visualized load transfer during cycles, revealing predictable hysteresis beneficial for energy dissipation. Omar watched the live telemetry with the focused intensity of someone watching a derivation prove itself. He felt a professional jolt. If replicated reliably, these hybrid principles could reduce retrofit costs, increase resiliency for certain typologies, and shift sustainability metrics substantially. Yet, scientific rigor demanded scrutiny. Skeptics pointed to long-term degradation concerns, biodegradation, moisture ingress, and fire resistance. Rosa and local researchers acknowledged these risks and presented mitigation pathways, species-specific treatment protocols, encapsulation techniques, and hybrid protective layers using treated timber composites. They produced life cycle analyses factoring local maintenance realities. The findings showed that treated bamboo, if properly specified and integrated, offered competitive durability while drastically lowering embodied carbon compared to pure steel concrete systems. The debate evolved from aesthetic novelty to engineering problem-solving, how to standardize treatments, warranties, and maintenance protocols across climates. As experiments continued, Omar took a more personal turn. He visited a coastal barangay where hybrid techniques had been used in vernacular communal buildings for generations. He listened to elders describe storms that carved paths through islands, yet left particular woven halls intact. He met families who maintained these structures with routine care, replacing nodes and relashing connections as communal practice. The social architecture, shared responsibility, and local skill networks emerged as critical to structural longevity. Omar realized engineering was not only about materials and forces, it was also about social systems that sustain maintenance. This reframing nudged him toward humility. Engineering must account for culture as infrastructure. Meanwhile, industry press picked up the story. Headlines framed the Dallas-like trope. Dubai engineers flocked to Cebu and debated whether the trend threatened established norms. Insurance underwriters raised questions about insurability. Accreditation bodies considered research committees. Architects circled potential applications. Omar returned to his firm with datasets and field notes, proposing a pilot project integrating hybrid systems into a mid-rise mixed-use block in a coastal emirate vulnerable to shifting loads and sustainability mandates. The proposal navigated corporate resistance, regulatory hurdles, and professional conservatism. Yet it also found advocates who saw the pilot as a strategic differentiator in an increasingly carbon-conscious market. The pilot moved forward cautiously. Design teams collaborated across time zones, exchanging CAD models, joint specifications, and environmental performance projections. Rosa led a technical exchange team, translating local craft tolerances into engineered connection details and maintenance manuals. Mang Ben and his crew trained certified craftsmen who could replicate nodes to exacting tolerances. Fabrication processes combined CNC cut molds for polymer connectors with hand-woven bamboo panels, achieving reproducible assembly while preserving essential artisanal flexibility. The project team emphasized documentation. Every node tagged, every material batch logged, and every treatment step recorded for future audits. This transparency sought to bridge trust gaps between innovation and liability. Construction began with cautious optimism. Local crews and visiting engineers calibrated assembly methods, tested mock connections, and iterated designs. When high winds arrived unexpectedly one afternoon, the team witnessed the hybrid facade absorb gusts differently than typical curtain walls. Movements were visible but controlled, and connections flexed without fracture. Cameras captured the motion. Sensors printed reassuring telemetry. Omar felt a private shift, an erosion of absolute certainty into conditional confidence. He began discussing maintenance plans not as afterthoughts, but as integral specifications, recognizing that community training and scheduled inspections were as essential as bolts and adhesives. Critics still probed. A prominent engineering regulator demanded 5-year performance guarantees before approving broader adoption. Rosa responded with humility and evidence. Multi-year pilot monitoring, accelerated aging tests, and third-party validation from independent labs. The team published interim reports and invited skeptics to inspect protocols. Transparency worked as persuasion. When independent labs corroborated the hybrid system's durability under specified treatments and maintenance cycles, regulatory attitudes softened. The narrative shifted toward conditional endorsement. Hybrid bamboo systems could be integrated responsibly when paired with documented maintenance regimes, rigorous material treatment, and accredited craft networks. The project's socio-technical ripple effects surprised many. Cebu's craft guilds gained formal recognition, apprenticeships expanded, and local economies diversified around certified node manufacturing. Dubai's architects discovered that aesthetic palettes could expand while life cycle impacts shrank. Environmental engineers celebrated reduced embodied carbon figures, while urban planners pondered adaptive low-cost housing strategies in coastal zones. The exchange reframed technology transfer. Instead of extraction, the collaboration emphasized co-development and mutual capacity building. Omar, once a skeptic, found himself advocating for institutional pathways to integrate contextual materials into mainstream practice, provided governance frameworks honored both safety and culture. The authority reversal culminated when Omar publicly addressed his colleagues in Dubai at an industry symposium. He described his initial dismissal and the evidence that changed his view. He credited Rosa, Mangben, and Cebu's craftspeople for their rigor and patience. He acknowledged the arrogance embedded in assuming superiority of scale-built materials without considering local adaptability and life cycle realities. The confession was not theatrical, it was professional and measured. Omar proposed formal partnerships for standards development and called for cross-cultural accreditation frameworks. His apology, combined with practical proposals, shifted debate from finger-pointing to policy-making. Professional humility began influencing institutional choices. International insurers and code bodies responded pragmatically. They convened joint working groups to draft guidelines for hybrid systems, emphasizing inspection cycles, treatment verification, and maintenance warranties. Certification schemes emerged for accredited node fabricators and craft apprentices. Funding bodies allocated grants to support longitudinal studies, comparing life cycle costs and performance metrics across climate zones. Rosa's laboratory received additional research funding to expand tests to fire retardancy and termite resistance under treated protocols. The result was a layered governance approach, innovation accompanied by oversight, not laissez-faire adoption. The balance reassured stakeholders and preserved cultural practice. The Cebu-Dubai collaboration produced prototypes beyond pilot blocks. Coastal community centers rebuilt with hybrid frames that offered storm resilience and local pride. Modular schoolrooms that could be quickly assembled and adapted, medium-rise facades in Dubai that showcased lattice aesthetics while meeting performance standards. Engineers documented energy savings and reduced foundation loads in specific designs, enabling recalibrated cost models for certain building types. The collaboration emphasized context sensitivity. Hybrid systems were not universal replacements, but strategic tools for sustainability. Their integration required careful systems thinking, stakeholder training, and long-term monitoring commitments. The human stories behind technical reports mattered. A young Cebu apprentice named Liza became a certified node technician, earning steady income and mentoring younger students. A Dubai project manager who once scoffed now requested continued knowledge exchanges, traveling regularly to Cebu. Mang Ben's guild gained municipal support to formalize apprenticeships, reducing out-migration by providing local opportunities. These micro-level shifts underscored deeper truths. Technological adoption must consider livelihoods and cultural identity. The collaboration matured into mutual reinforcement rather than extraction, blending craft dignity with engineering standardization. Critics of globalization found the case instructive. They argued that even beneficial exchanges risk commodifying culture if not governed ethically. The Cebu-Dubai partnership responded by embedding benefit-sharing clauses into contracts, royalties for traditional knowledge holders, scholarship funds for apprentices, and co-ownership of patents for hybrid connectors. Legal counsel crafted contracts acknowledging cultural custodians as co-authors of technical innovations. This legal recognition reframed intellectual property debates around community rights and equitable compensation. The approach provided a practical template for future collaborations involving traditional knowledge and modern engineering. Media narratives evolved from sensational headlines to nuanced analyses. International journals published peer-reviewed articles documenting rigorous test protocols and long-term monitoring results. Conferences highlighted governance frameworks and community-led certification. Observers noted an important cultural turn. Authority was not only about expertise, but about listening and co-creating. Omar's firm revised procurement policies to include contextual materials, reviews and community engagement assessments as part of feasibility studies. Universities developed joint programs, blending material science with ethnographic methods. The arc of professional learning demonstrated how institutions can adapt when humility becomes structural. The philosophical closure arrived not as a slogan, but as a practice. Architects, engineers, and communities embraced the principle that durable structures require both material intelligence and social scaffolding. Built form depends on ongoing care. Materials flourish when maintained by embedded social processes. The Cebu experience taught that hybridization extends beyond materials to collaborative governance. It argued for engineering humility, the readiness to update models when diverse evidence appears, and the capacity to embed maintenance obligations into design life cycles. Omar's apology transformed into policy, and policy into practice, yielding resilient prototypes and renewed professional norms. Years later, the pilot projects remained monitored case studies, offering lessons to cities facing climate uncertainty and resource constraints. Dubai incorporated hybrid facades in select projects, adhering to strict protocols and maintenance regimes. Cebu scaled accredited node manufacturing, exporting expertise responsibly under licensing agreements that ensured community benefits. Academic programs seeded a generation of engineers who combined computational modeling with field sensitivity. The story's arc, from viral ticket to institutional change, showed how serendipitous impulses can catalyze systemic learning when guided by evidence and ethical frameworks. The most enduring lesson was modest. Progress grows where curiosity meets rigor and where respect for local wisdom becomes actionable policy. The Filipino technique did not break Dubai's engineering, it complemented it under defined conditions. The engineers who traveled to Cebu returned with new tools and a changed posture. Less certainty, more listening. Communities in Cebu gained economic opportunities and formal recognition for craft knowledge. The exchange rebalanced narratives of expertise. Mastery sometimes resides in unexpected places, and professional pride must yield to empiricism and partnership when evidence calls. On a quiet evening, years after the initial viral fuss, Omar returned to Cebu not as a skeptic, but as a colleague. He stood under a lattice facade that filtered sunlight into measured patterns, watching children play in its shade. Rosa walked beside him, pointing out craftsmanship subtleties and maintenance rhythms. Mangben greeted them, smiling modestly. No award ceremony framed the moment. There was only mutual acknowledgement and a shared commitment to preserve knowledge responsibly. If there is a single takeaway from this documentary arc, it is this. Engineering excellence pairs technical rigor with cultural humility. When institutions listen, ancient techniques can become modern instruments for resilience, and humility becomes the foundation on which the tallest towers can stand.